Well, so actually, as we move into official live coding time, that's such a that's such a nice point to transition on, is that the last few weeks have really felt like, whether you call it deep building or hacking or just troubleshooting, because what the heck is going on? uh, it does feel a little bit like documentation has been on temporary hold, right? Because we've all been trying to just think of how to get the next tool to do the next thing, or at the very least to work, given the networks we've got. So thanks. And I don't know if you guys have joined us for an official live coding session, but hey, everybody, for if you're participating in Plutus PBL, Abdel Karim and Jingles, HJ right here, are the two lead devs behind Mesh, those tools that we've been using and really starting to benefit from, and that we'll continue to be using. And they were just sharing some really exciting news. So I don't want to steal your guys' thunder too much, but the two key points, as I can summarize them, one, there was an interesting mystery that had to do with building transactions to interact with smart contracts. And as I was playing with it last week, I noticed that I was getting slightly different transaction hashes when I tried to build a smart contract interaction. And we were all kind of banging our heads against that, but especially Abdel Karim and Jingles. And they discovered that data was being reordered out of sight. And when data was just reordered, even though the content of it wasn't changed, that would result in getting a a completely different transaction hash, which was then yielding failed transactions for me as I was kind of playing with those unlocking from the faucet. So I don't know how you guys did it, but you somehow discovered that that was the problem. And Abdel Karim reached out earlier this week to say, hey, I think we fixed it. And so I made a quick update to the front end template repo, just updating to the newest version of Mesh, and immediately my unlocking transaction worked. So kudos and thank you to you guys for figuring that one out. And so that's an immediate benefit. And more on that in just a moment. The other thing we were just talking about is Jingles was sharing a vision for creating custodial wallet capabilities within Mesh, which, and this is something we're going to have to really dive into over the next few weeks just to understand this as a development option. But long story short, the new things that these guys are building into Mesh right now are going to make it possible to build dApps that have built-in wallet functionality, to the extent where you might even be able to build a consumer-facing dApp that hides all of the wallet from the end user. And so when we think about, utility and adoption by people who might not be ready yet to have their own wallet, but want to benefit from some of the utility being built onto the blockchain, we now have this option of building that capability directly into a dApp, which is incredible. That kind of blows the lid off of the potential of what we built. And personally, I don't believe that this is like one or the other. I don't think we're going to live in the world where you've got some people using dApps where you have to connect your wallet, and other people using dApps that have these kind of hidden custodial wallets built in. I think this is just a use case question. I feel very comfortable using a browser-based wallet, for example, but that doesn't mean that there's not dApps I would love to use where I don't have to think about my wallet. I just want to use the dApp for its utility. And so as developers, all of us here, that's just another design decision for all of us to be thinking about, which is the best choice for any given situation. And so guys, thank you. You blew my mind, and you hear me talking right here, but I'm just still trying to process what you just told me because it's really, really exciting. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you summarized so well. Like I would like to write it down somewhere so that it can be used as an introduction in the future.
Hey, that's the least I could do for you. But yeah, we're recording this session, and I'll share this with you so we can always just go back to this. And so back to the point about documentation. The documentation of these new tools will continue to be added to the mesh playground that I think a lot of us here have started to tinker with a bit. And now that the contract unlocking transaction mystery is solved, we're almost out of the woods. Okay, so because the other thing that we have to think about is, okay, what network is this working on, right? So I think we're all generally aware that the version of testnet we were all using at the start of this course, it broke. And if there's time later, if people have questions about what that means that it broke, we can return to that later in this live coding session. But the point is, we need a new testnet, or some bigger technical work needs to be done to maybe save the old testnet. And there's not a clear consensus on which of those pathways people are going to be moving forward with. Personally, I'm perceiving a growing consensus that the pre-production test network is going to be a viable one. And I want to give a shout out to Lucas and Curtis for reaching out to Roberto to think about how we can provision Dandelion for that. And I talked to Roberto yesterday, and he was just so inspired about the work we are doing here. And he said, oh man, now that I know what's going on in PBL, of course I'm gonna, get that pre-production Dandelion to work. So Lucas, thanks for running point on that. Keep us posted if there are opportunities for other folks here to learn more about that. But I just couldn't be more excited that it feels like Dandelion PBL is just starting to form organically through this work, right? Here we are, refining these tools. Roberto said that the deployment tools for Dandelion have been kind of massively upgraded because of this new need to be able to provision different networks. So good things all around. Yes, yay, Lucas. Yay to everybody. I mean, this is it, right? People are finding ways that you see tooling and processes can be improved, and just kudos to everybody for starting to notice what problems you can work on. So that's really what we're here for today. We're not going to as much look at code today, but this is our intermission session. And so I have right here, oops, let me get on, let me add this screen, just 1 second. I have a Miro link. So if you've spent any time at Gimbal Labs preceding this PBL course, you know that another tool that we frequently use to organize work is called Miro. If you haven't seen it yet, we're going to play with it today. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm also going to share the link to this board right here. Anyone can edit. Okay. So in the chat, if you are on a device where you can join this Miro board, please jump in right now. And I'll give a little guide of some of what we're talking through today. But I'm also going to ask you to add your notes here. And you shouldn't have to log into Miro in order to use this. if you have any technical problems getting in, or if you're joining us from a phone, just know that this meeting is being recorded. I will post it to Canvas, and I will reach out with some follow-up steps for everybody to come in here and take after today's session. So it's August 25th. This is week 6 of 11 in the summer 2022 Plutus PBL cohort. And we reserved this week from early on to be an intermission. We had no idea that all these testnet issues were gonna pop up, but gosh, the timing has been perfect just to take this moment to reflect on how we're doing, for people to catch up or study deeply the things that interest them so far. And now we get to align our thinking a bit so that we can collaboratively set priorities for the next few weeks. So these are our guiding questions, right? Focusing on you. What do you want to prioritize for the next 5 weeks? We recognize that 5 weeks goes fast. And none of us, including myself, are going to do everything we want to do in the next 5 weeks. I have so much I want to learn. And so I have to set clear priorities for myself as well. But as I set those priorities, maybe I surface new ways to collaborate, and we can start thinking about, hey, what happens after these 5 weeks? Hey, Miro was taking a long time for me yesterday. I've had better luck today, but yeah, it does seem like there was some hiccup. Anybody else struggling to get into the Miro board? Let me know if that continues.
Thanks for that. Yeah, still loading for Bernard as well. It's a bit of a weird one, but yeah, let's just see. For now, I'll just watch the screen.
Yeah. And if anybody cannot, oh, go ahead.
From my side, what I do is, because I have several Chrome profiles, I just go for the least one that has less extensions, no logins, no anything, just almost like as a private browser window, and open it there, and it works. Because on my other windows, I have the logins and it messes up everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll give that a go. All right. Cheers.
Thanks for tinkering with it. And yeah, again, we're recording. So, okay, high level roadmap. Now that we are, we're operating on not complete confidence, but relative confidence that by next week, we should be able to query the pre-production testnet with Dandelion. And that's a prerequisite towards really being able to implement the PPBL faucet project, because you need to be able to query a contract address on whatever network you're interacting with in order for the faucet to work. So that mini project remains on momentary hold, but as soon as we have, again, the ability to query pre-production testnet, then those final lessons of the mini project will roll out and people will be able to complete that. So no pressure to move through that yet. And I'll be sure to, with enthusiasm, let everybody know that the final steps for that are ready. Everything about the Plutus contract is valid. So if you've started the mini project, you're in great shape. And even though it's easy to say that testnet is broken, it is still running, right? It's no longer supported, but it is still running. And so you can still familiarize yourself with the front end code and how those contract interactions work. So that's there. We also want to start on the PPBL credential project, more on the 3 main projects that we're going to focus on in just a moment. But we're continuing to start, thinking about minimum outcomes. What should somebody plan on accomplishing if they want to earn a credential for completing this course? That's a non-developer, right? Or developer broadly defined sort of question for all of us to share our input on next week. Then, for the first 3 weeks of September, everybody here has the opportunity to move from specializing in whatever pathway is most interesting to you into contributing on some of these projects that are already listed as outcomes for this course, and maybe something else, right? It's a short amount of time, but let's see what else comes up over the next few weeks. And then we will close out during the week of September 26th by sharing results of what we've done so far, defining next steps for each other. My goal is to continue to collaborate with anybody who's interested at the end of September, and then to distribute those credential tokens on mainnet. So that's where we're going. Before we get deeper into the details of what each of us want to do, I want to start by talking about barriers and bridges today. So if you are following along, you can look at these orange and green boxes near the top of the board. And one thing we've really tried to communicate over the first half of this course is that everything that's hard or frustrating or inconvenient about building on Cardano right now, one way we could look at those things are as barriers. Of course, there are barriers to entry for building on Cardano. What we're trying to do here is reframe any of those barriers as opportunities. And so that's what we mean by bridges here, okay? What barriers do we notice, and what bridges do they represent in terms of opportunities for what we might want to do next? So here's the first prompt, okay? Everybody should take at least one sticky note on each of these boards, the barriers and bridges, and try to write down some barriers you've noticed over these first 5 weeks, and be relentless, okay? No need to retain your optimism. Talk about barriers as, in whatever tone you'd like to, but then a challenge. Try to reframe each barrier you've noticed as a bridge or an opportunity. I'm gonna put, I'll put this link in the chat again. Oh, thanks, A. And A, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, no, I just wanted to give those who are unfamiliar with Miro a little bit of a pointer. Instead of being kind of stuck, if you're unsure whether you want to be on the tab which has Zoom open, or whether you want to be on the separate tab with Miro open, what you can basically keep obviously the Zoom one and hear James's voice through that, or anyone else's, but be on the Miro board and you can follow people. So just like click on, as you can see at the top right hand side where you've got the little icons, if you click on, say, James's icon there, or his face, you'll then follow him around. I just realized that a lot of people, right up there, a lot of people don't actually know this feature exists.
Very good.
Yeah, super helpful. That just follows them around, and then you can break that, once you start to interact, and then if you want to go back to that, just do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I recognize we're just throwing another tool on the table. So please, if anybody has technical questions or if this isn't working, let us know. But that's great advice from A. You can minimize Zoom if you already have Miro open, because this should be an interactive session. And the idea is for all of us to kind of add thoughts to this board over the course of this meeting. Okay, so step 1, let's talk barriers and bridges. Take a few moments. Try to identify at least one barrier you've encountered or noticed over the last few weeks, and then try to reframe that barrier as a bridge or an opportunity. If you don't have access to Miro, feel free to also unmute and just share what you're thinking, and I'll be sure to take notes for you.
So James, I had a thought on that's kind of relevant to this one, but it was primarily those 3 projects. I'm sorry, go ahead, James.
No, go. That's great.
The 3 projects that you have listed so far, I'm wondering if one of the additional projects can be collectively coming together and doing a pull request on, so like exploring some libraries that are impacted by this pre-production and testnet issue, and just picking one and maybe working towards a pull request where it fixes their code. I'm on my mobile phone, so I tried and I started making unwanted changes to the Miro board. So I will do that in a second. But yeah, just kind of, I feel like it serves a few purposes. It shows, right, what open source is about and how we can contribute as a community, even though maybe we're not core team developers, and we can impact the way it affects the rest of the community as well by just helping out, similar
That's
to what
awesome.
Lucas has been doing with Roberto and Dandelion.
Yeah. All right. That's awesome. I just added it to the list of of projects for us. That's fantastic. So we've got technical issues, right? Installing the tooling on M1 was definitely a challenge. Nix has come with its own challenges, and we know these testnet issues. What else? Any, those are some of the really big ones. Anything that was, maybe it was small, your barrier, or some little challenge that maybe you haven't voiced yet. These can be big or small, the barriers that you notice. All right.
From my side, can I explain my biggest problem? Maybe you can help me to put it on the barriers and as a bridge.
Yes, please.
When I was working from the time we started till now, for example, let's say to install a node, I would use the link Kimber Labs gives us. Then I reach a certain point where I have a problem. Then I search now for a solution. I discovered that there are so many different documentations on one thing all over the internet. For example, if you say install Cardano node, you will find even on Cardano documentations, there are 2 or 3 different documenting people in different groups tackling the same issue. The problem is these different documentations are not updated. Sometimes you will find they are not even, let me say, they are very helpful because when you consult this documentation, you will see another part of the problem. But the problem now, it leads you again into another, you are lost onto another road. There's a need to have one unified documentation about a particular tool on a certain version. And all documentations around must just center on the main or feed to one main. So that if I encounter a problem, for example, instead of me going to, I know people will run to Discord and they post the problem. And then we don't get a reply. Then I go to Stake Exchange. I search. I don't find anything. Then I post. And then I don't know when they are going to reply. But for me, I'm waiting. I need a solution so that I carry on. Then I go again to the GitHub where that tool is being developed or maintained. Then where it says raise an issue, I post. Then the next thing is I have to wait.
Yep.
So there is a, for example, on a faucet, it was very strange for me to find that we only have got one area to get faucets from. I had about 3 to 4 different links leading to faucets. All of them were not working. Probably it's because of this testnet problem. But also, why are we having all these 4 or 5 different documentations and links leading into faucets?
Okay, so let's build a bridge. You just named a barrier, and you're exactly right. So let's try to reframe this as a bridge. And I noticed, hey, just for anybody who's brand new to Miro, if you double click on a sticky note, you should be able to type directly on it. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's possible to make text, but for anybody who's adding to these notes here, I'll grab this comment right here. I get it? Yes.
Quick question here. I'm assuming that people are mapping. Oh, I need to lower my hand. People are mapping the exact position of the square from the barrier to the bridge.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, if that's happening, that's great. But I don't want to lose the thread of everything Bernard just said. So let's pin that for just a second, eh?
All right, cool.
Okay. So Bernard, one of the
Yeah.
barriers I heard you name is that there is a variety of different documentation for the same things. Right? There are, if I search the internet, or even if I start from a given developer portal, it's likely that I will end up overwhelmed by the many different instances of documentation. While at the same time, the second barrier I heard you name is that that documentation is often out of date. If I'm summarizing the two things, would you say those are the two main barriers?
Yes.
Okay.
You're right.
So as a bridge, I'm gonna write a question, and this might not yet fully be a bridge, okay? But just to really push us to think about what we're doing here, for me, it seems the bridge is the opportunity to ask, how can we create reliable documentation in a decentralized dev ecosystem,
Correct.
right? And this is fascinating.
Yes, you got it right.
This word decentralized, supposedly it's a good thing, but it seems to us that decentralization is not great for documentation. You end up with documentation all over the place. Well, so what's the answer? Should we, is our goal to have a centralized repo for documentation? Okay, well, now we're talking about building centralized systems in a decentralized ecosystem. And that's fascinating. It's so interesting to me every time my mind wishes to re-centralize, you know? Now, the second one, why does documentation go out of date? Well, tools are changing so quickly, right? Some of the first modules of this course, which all rolled out over the last 5 weeks, are already out of date. It's only been 5 weeks. How is it out of date already? Come on, right? But we got to update that. And of course, that takes time. And why don't people update documentation right away? Well, of course, part of it is that things are changing quickly. But what's more profitable? Selling NFTs or keeping documentation up to date? What's more profitable, trying to build a startup or writing documentation? And I hope the answers are obvious. And so this leads us to another question that I think is really interesting to bridge. Yeah. How do we fund reliable documentation? How can we pay people to live sustainably or contributing to public goods? And for me, and you know, I might be skipping a few logical steps here, but for me, this is why I'm here. How do we pay people sustainably for contributing to public goods? That's a problem that predates blockchain. This has been a problem for much longer than we've been working in Cardano. And I think it's fascinating that we have a chance to ask this question straight up. Why does the documentation suck? Because nobody pays anybody to write documentation. So what can we do about that? What systems can we build? I think we might have some opportunities there. What do you think?
I do agree. You see, decentralization in terms of documenting a single app or dApp, there must be some form of standards. Probably those standards must be ushered by the dApp or project owners, so that all other decentralized entities writing documentation in their different environments and different languages, they conform to that standard. And they all link to somewhere where anyone who is lost, he gets in there, then he's gonna know, all right, we've got various links that deal with this project. And then if, for example, there is an issue, a problem, you go to Stack Exchange. For me, I think when everyone goes to Stack Exchange, in the long run, when I go to Stack Exchange, I will most likely find an answer and quicker, because that is what we need.
Yeah.
But the question now is, who is going to pay for different entities doing documentation, unless probably these different entities apply to Catalyst?
So these are not theoretical questions. These are vibrant and real questions right now that we get to work on together. Now, we're not going to fully answer those questions today, but getting these questions on the table. What experiments might we run? How might we use Cardano native assets, for example, to better incentivize documentation? These are the kinds of things that personally I would love to dig deep into. And that's what I mean by bridges here. Nelson, yeah.
So what I wanted to say was like, well, let's just focus on our PPBL course. So while I was going through the modules, there are parts of the documentation which I can contribute to. It's not that much of a deal. So there are things that I could improve. So what I was thinking at the time was maybe there should be, I think there's ways that we can make a push and request a commit to you to change the documentation, right? So sort of we can do sort of those things, like those who are taking the course can help improve the documentation of our course so that it becomes so that everyone is working on it and it becomes better. Like writing the documentation should take time. So maybe we doing it and the teachers can verify and maybe commit to the real main branch. And we have the credentials token, right? So maybe we can give some credits for that and put it on the credential maybe.
Excellent. Yes. Okay, good. So I just did my best to capture what Nelson's saying right here. So here's a few more things to teach you about Miro in case this tool is new. First of all, you can, if I tried to capture it quickly, so if I'm missing anything here, you can add it. Also, as you start to look through other sticky notes on this board, one thing you can do is you can click on a sticky note and you can choose the emoji icon. And if you see something that you agree with, you could, for example, put an emoji on it, like a 100 or maybe a green check or whatever you'd like. So this is a way of sending your signal to whoever added that sticky note that you're right there with them and you agree with that. Another feature of using these sticky notes on a board like this is you see these little dots on each side of the sticky. If I click this one on the right-hand side, for example, it creates an arrow and another sticky note. And so Nelson's logic said, okay, well, maybe we could have some processes for people taking the course to contribute to documentation. And then he added that maybe there's something where we can talk about, you know, contribution, credential tokens, and you've got me thinking even about rewards, you know, for these kinds of contributions. And so I think that's a really interesting bridge to build. And we're going to come back to this idea later in this meeting. But I just want people to know that you can mark up and draw connections. You can also do this with existing sticky notes. So if I saw that like this one was connected to this one, I can create an arrow like that. So feel free to rearrange and start thinking about connections between some of these. Hey.
Hey. Oh, there we go. Yeah, let me lower my hand. Yeah, good points which are being raised here. If I may just take 2 minutes to contribute here, because I feel like there's a nice reference here that I think would make sense. Could I share my entire screen? There we go. Share screen. So one of the things that comes to mind, let me know once you are able to see my screen.
It. Yeah, it looks
okay,
good.
Cool. One of the things that comes to mind is bounties, right? So the problem that Bernard brought up, I agree, you know, is is quite an important thing, and yeah, it has preceded, you know, all of this technology and internet, etc. But I'm actually quite optimistic. Earlier, you know, you mentioned the work that Krimu and company are doing with Mesh, and you know, I just quickly mentioned in the chat that I've been working. I've been, you know, thinking a lot about something along these lines, and I'm at the moment just calling it Open Wallet. But I'll share more on that, because I think there's a lot of value to be built from, because I think at the end of the day, the wallets are going to be commodified. Like, it's a race to the bottom. So I think actually doing it in a sort of decentralized open way makes a lot more sense. But anyway, so coming back to how things like bounties, etc., can actually, you know, factor into all of this, Bernard mentioned Stack Exchange and other such environments. If you look at what incentivizes people to contribute, it's not particularly just monetarily. It's also just in other things, right? So this is a reference which I often come back to. If you look it up online, it's called the competitive spectrum, but I think that kind of just sides with one particular column here. So I've added the collaborative / competitive spectrum, and basically it breaks it down, as you can see, into these 5 different categories. The first being caring, then collaborative, then cordial, competitive, and then finally combative. And then you can see the goals and the actions broken down here. You know, those who are caring, their goals are, you know, members each help each other. Those who are collaborative, members share goals. Those who are acting in a cordial manner own non-conflicting goals. And then those who are competitive, basically members share goals. So obviously, you know, it's a sort of, in a way, zero-sum-ish type environment. And then lastly, you've got the combative, where it's opposing goals. Actually, no, yeah, I think that last thing that I said about zero sum applies to the combative a lot less than or a lot more than the competitive. But you get the idea. So I think in us thinking about how to solve, you know, this issue of the commons, I think it's helpful to think about the different things which incentivize people to actually to contribute, right? Because obviously money makes a lot of sense, and you know, thinking about catalysts, etc., makes a bunch of sense. But I think if you think of things like bounties, and obviously in answering a bounty, yes, you can get money for it, but also you can get other things like, you know, and speaking, you know, and this in a way kind of refers back to the a quick reference which James made at the beginning about certification. You know, this can gradually become, you know, your resume, your CV over time. These things which you've sort of dealt with or solved for in a specific context, right? Which can historically sort of be evaluated, right? Because as we said, things evolve really quickly. But no, I just wanted to quickly share that. I hope that was, I think it was relevant, and yeah, I hope it was helpful.
I think so. Thanks, Nay. You know, and this is, so I mentioned earlier this kind of organic transition we're making into maybe Dandelion PBL for people who are recognizing, oh man, if I just knew how to deploy Dandelion, I would do that for pre-production, right? In the very same way, what you're sharing is an immediate bridge towards tokenomics work, right? When we talk about tokenomics, yeah, of course we have to talk about some level of financial value capture. A sustainable tokenomics system ought to sustain humans to live, right? I mean, we have to think about that part, but also it's never limited to that. There are so many other incentives that we respond to, or non-financial goals all of us have, that a robust tokenomic system will balance with the obvious financial concerns. So that's really interesting to me. And, you know, following this course, you know, this is on our agenda to return to today. but very high level, what follows this Plutus PBL summer course is maybe deeper PBLs, deeper Plutus PBLs, but also a tokenomics PBL that first ran the first half of this year and that we're excited to iterate on. And as I've mentioned, Dandelion PBL. So it's exciting that we're starting to see these different threads and different people here. I hope that you're noticing, right? What are you most interested in? Do you want to keep going with the Plutus bit? Do those tokenomics questions really interest you? And is that where you eventually want to end up? Dandelion or something else? This is what we have the opportunity to be thinking about. So yeah, I think that's great to have in mind. Okay. So zooming out, we can continue to establish barriers and bridges. If anybody feels the need to rearrange and draw different connections here, this is your board, okay? This is a place where we can plan together with the goal of setting clear priorities for ourselves and for each other. But let's drill down a little bit, okay? So right now, thinking about support that you need to do the next thing. What are some individual needs that you might have right now? Please take a moment to share those on this next section of the board. And it's okay if you're being redundant, okay? You might have mentioned something one way as a barrier here, but if there's something immediate that we need to focus on in order to help you do the next thing, this is the place for that. All right. I'm giving that one an emoji, that's for sure. Excited to jump in to, the deeper Plutus part. We've spent these first 5 weeks kind of building up some scaffolding about the big picture of what Cardano development looks like. And we've spent a limited amount of time actually looking at Plutus code. So I would say, yeah, it's about time. Let's look at some contract logic. Good. Okay. And keep in mind that this part of the board, you can come back to this anytime and add some additional thoughts about what support you need. We don't have to take too long if nothing's coming to mind right now or if you have nothing to add. And so last high level feedback bit before we start looking forward. What advice do you have as we think about future iterations of this beginner Plutus PBL course? What should we change? Anything about these last 5 weeks that should be tweaked or reconsidered? Please share your feedback here.
I think it's worth mentioning, when it comes to giving feedback, there's always that tension of like, oh, I don't want to offend, etc., etc. So I think it's important, to highlight that James did share the link that, you didn't have to log in or, whatever. So like no one actually knows who's writing what up. So, just be honest. Whenever your identity is tied to your opinion, that tends to be a thing. People tend to what's the word, self-censor. So yeah, just be aware of that. Yeah, because again, because we're really early days in this, and everything here is kind of path dependent. So the better we make the building environment and sort of workflows, the better it will kind of just continuously get to be, for lack of a better expression. So, yeah.
And if you want to come back here later, same thing. But I couldn't agree more, right? This is not a place to worry about feelings. We want real feedback. We want to make this better, all right? And each time get better. And just on a personal note, you can't hurt my feelings. I used to teach 14-year-olds, so I've heard everything that can possibly be said. I don't take anything personally anymore.
So then
That was supposed to be a joke about 14-year-olds. Sorry.
so you've probably heard "I hate you" many times before, and
that would be gentle. That's too easy. Yeah.
like things that really hit under the skin.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did have one specific topic that to try to bring up for those of you that have gone through Canvas and done some of that, and then a lot of you have actually reached out on Discord. I'm aware that many of us maybe haven't used Discord before coming to this course and are just now becoming familiar with Discord. But there's two methods right now to reach out for support and assistance. You can use Canvas and in the discussion boards and asking for assistance. You can come to Discord. We also have Lucas set up the study groups and everything through Calendly to try to get together. So my question is for you guys, what method worked best for you? And is there any improvements you would suggest? Did you like reaching out on Canvas and getting support there so that the rest of the learners can see it? Or did you like Discord because you got a more hands-on approach for support? Or did you like the study groups? What did you guys like?
Good question. If I can share my experience since early last year. See, the community is decentralized. Different individuals who are in the communities are highly experts in their various environments. What has worked for me most is getting help on Discord. And a lot of people in Cardano, they do give help for free. As long as you just tell them, I have a problem here, and they happen to be there online, that is what they've helped me a lot. So people must not be afraid or shy to say, I don't know this, help me with this. There's no one sometimes who really knows the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So even in some areas, you are told this is an experiment. For example, the catalyst itself is an experiment. I didn't know that. So there are really no hard and fast rules except that let's help each other. For example, if I see you struggling, post a question, what does this mean? I mustn't have any judgment about you, your personality. You have been a 10-year developer in C#, but now you are failing not even to use a simple tool. No, it is not like that. People here are very helpful. They are learning. They are open. The only thing is we are battling with very difficult ecosystem tools. They are not only difficult for a certain particular group, for everybody. You can see even the upgrade for vessel is almost taking around 2 months or getting to an end of a year again. It's a sign that those people need help. If we can help, let's help. if you can learn, but after learning what you do, come back and help where you can help. But sometimes our help, we don't know whether we are really helping with the correct information or we are messing up. So this is why
Also
sometimes
true.
we
Yeah.
refer.
Yeah, that's a
We
good
refer.
point. That's a good
We don't
point.
want to worsen the problem.
That's a good point. So
Yeah.
that again speaks to, we have this opportunity to continue to build out systems, right? So as we are learning, we're also supporting each other. And like you just said, also recognizing when our support might be incomplete. And this is where, for example, an idea like mentorship comes into play. Who benefits the most from a mentor or tutoring relationship? It's often the tutor or the mentor, because they have a chance to really find out what they understand. And so that might be another thing for us to be thinking about, is how do we create scaffolds for these kinds of supporting and peer support systems that in the end are really going to help people level up their expertise even further. That might be something for us to look at. Okay, so I want to move to looking ahead to specific projects. And again, keep in mind, this board is now an artifact that all of us can return to anytime. I'm going to keep this tab open and continue to use it as a resource to make decisions about what to plan next, what support to prioritize, or even where I should really lean in a little more deeply to the documentation for a project to make sure that it comes across. But our goal is really to be starting to work on projects together, okay? And over the next 5 weeks, we're not going to build all of these things at scale. I mentioned very early in this course that we're going to build some basic versions of some tools that really work and that ideally equip you with primitive building blocks that can then be put together in different ways to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And that's why these 3 projects are selected for this course. And also, before going any deeper, we want to add your ideas to this list. If there's something that you want to build as your method to learn about Cardano development, it should be on this list. Okay, so 2 approaches: contributing to what's here. Like Curtis said, we have this option now, right? Thinking about how do we contribute to other libraries or sets of tooling, and maybe some additional projects could be added to this list. But let's just start quickly thinking about these 3 projects at a high level. Credential tokens. We've introduced this one, all right? Together, this group right here is going to define the metadata that is included on the completion or credential token for this course. This gives us a chance to think about, scrolling over to the right, minting tokens and a bit about NFT utility, right? This might be different from an art NFT because there's some goals for these credential tokens, some things some access they might open up, or use cases. And then of course we have to think about metadata and standards, right? What we're doing here is going to be our own interpretation of how we think about what data should be on a credential, but we will not yet have spoken to all of the other educators in the Cardano ecosystem, all the other ways to learn. And eventually we want to support building out standards. This is just a place to start. And so this project gives us a way to start thinking about that. Now, over here on the right, I see Curtis already noticed this, right? There are 2 emojis on each of these sticky notes, the thinker and the wave, okay? And so for any one of these sticky notes, here's what these represent. The thinker means that you want to watch, right? You want to be kind of an observer thinking about these projects. And the wave means, hey, sign me up. I want to work on that. I want to contribute to that, okay? So whatever you're curious about participating in, tap the thinker. If you at least want to, again, be a little bit more passive, but learning by watching. And the wave, if you really want to dive in deep and learn by doing any of these components. Next, a dashboard. Okay, so let me go to a live demo for just a minute. There's a link right here that says Gimbal A0. All right, this dashboard reports on the working groups that emerged from the first work we ever did on the Gimbal token. We allowed anybody who wanted to join in the work starting in January. And we initialized, a very early draft of a tokenomics PBL course just by working together. And the results of this work are that this set of groups received an early allocation of gimbals. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of that, right? The gimbal tokenomics and where these tokens went and what happens next. That's beyond the scope of right now. But what I want you to see is that this table right here is populated with a GraphQL query. All right, what we're able to do is create a query that shows how many gimbals are currently held at the addresses of each of these working groups. And we can start to see that in some cases, all of those gimbals have already moved elsewhere. They started with this many and now they have this many. But in other cases, they started with this many and well, that's how many are still there. And that's just an interesting data point. This is not telling the complete story, but I can quickly start to see, well, it looks like most of the gimbals that were distributed haven't moved yet. And how do I know that? I know it from on-chain data. And so this is what this project is about. How can we use on-chain data to start building collaboration or better coordination? We can show who owns tokens. We can show how tokens are moving. We can start to use them alongside credentials or summer 2022 tokens. And for a more hands-on version of this, in the front-end repo, if you're running it locally, you can go to the link for token holders. I think I have that running right now. Let me check. Yeah. All right. So this link at the top of the page, PPBL Summer 2022 token holders. In the front-end template, you can see where this list of addresses came from. This being the list on testnet of all of the current holders of a PPBL Summer 2022 token. It's pretty easy to get this list, but this isn't really helpful yet. How can we make it do something? It's pretty easy to get a list via GraphQL of every transaction that has happened with a given token. And I hope it's obvious that this right here is not really going to be useful to your average user. This is on purpose, right? But how might I use this data right here to tell a story that leads to action? And so that's what the second project is about. All right, at a high level, we need to study querying the blockchain. We need to study how the data layers and DB sync work. And then, of course, we need front ends that make that data useful and help people make decisions. So that's the second project. questions about these first two?
Could you speak a little bit about that one? Yeah, metadata standards, interoperability, and what they're thinking. Because I have some thoughts around that. I'm just curious to hear what yours
Definitely.
or
All
yeah.
right, we're gonna, so it's trivial to mint a token. I hope that's one of the things people have realized over these last 5 weeks is once you do it once, minting a token just isn't that hard on Cardano. And that's incredible. That it still blows my mind every time I think about that. So, okay, if it's easy to mint a token, then what are we gonna do with them? And one of the things that gives a token an additional layer of utility is the metadata on its minting transaction, right? Every Cardano NFT in its current incarnation has this metadata on the 721 key that allows for those, those virtual assets to be visualized on Pool PM, or even in our Eternal and Nami wallets and beyond now, or at JPEG Store, and the list could go on, right? That all of that utility that gave rise to this entire CNFT ecosystem comes from agreement about a metadata standard. Well, of course, that's not the only use case. So if we're going to claim that some token we're going to mint is a credential for finishing this course, it should have some data on it that represents something. And I hope if you're like me, you've already got some ideas. I'm trying my best to bite my tongue right now and not start naming examples because I don't want to push. I don't want to be the main leader of this conversation. I really want people to come together and think, okay, what metadata would be on this token? And why would it be there? And how would we represent it? How would we want to use it? And by digging into that as a project and thinking through, okay, what is that data going to be? Now we've planted our flag as a group. And we've said, look, this is the way we're looking at what data might be on a credential token. And now we can bring that out into the world, right? Whatever we built, that's going to be out there. Are people going to agree with it? I don't know. Let's go find out because that's going to be really interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, super. Yeah, I personally I'm quite keen to share my thoughts on that. Was actually looking to do something within Epoch 360 to sort of mint something that is around my thinking around metadata. Well, yeah, I don't mind, but I feel like I might be a little bit biased in that regard. But obviously,
So,
if you're
and just
open
to
hear-
let's pin the details for just a moment. Okay,
Sure.
but just to point out, I do think it's worth having an opinionated facilitator here.
Okay.
But I
Cool.
think that I've already taken way too much airtime in this course. And so I don't, for just in principle, I don't want to be the facilitator of this. I would love to participate. And if you or if anybody else here wants to be that opinionated leader of a project like this, I think you do a great service to the group. But my goal is over time to talk dramatically less and listen and contribute more as we all onboard to these different projects. So just take this pink note as a tongue in cheek, but certainly possible. That could be really fun to have you kind of leading the way on that.
Awesome. Cool.
All right, third project. This is the DAP. Okay, so we've got kind of the credential tokens. Lucas, I think this is a really awesome project to bring to those people who identify as maybe less technical, because we need non-technical thinkers thinking about these standards for credentials. The token dashboard, it's very much a front end thing, right? Writing queries and then presenting the results of those queries in a way that tells a story and maybe even drives action. When it comes to Dap building, this is the primitive Dap that we get to tinker with. What it is it's a single application that consists of 2 contracts that work in tandem. And it's easier to explain this if I go to, we actually have a live demo on mainnet right here. Okay. So, and this hasn't been updated since June, but just to show you this, okay. This is kind of the schematic of how this DAP works. You've got 2 contracts represented in purple. One of them represents a treasury where some collection of tokens are locked. The next contract represents an escrow contract where individual commitments to work are held between the time that someone commits to working on them and the time that they're complete. I know, Lucas, I was laughing about that this morning, right? It's like, it's weird. It's almost easier to work on mainnet right now. So at least we know that this one still works. That's exactly right. And so now you've got 2 parties here. You've got an issuer, somebody who owns the treasury and issues bounties for tasks or work to be done. And then you have contributors who say, oh yeah, I want to do that. Now, there's a particular stance that this DAP takes, and it doesn't have to be this way. So I always want to point out that this DAP right here has a pretty strongly held opinion embedded within its code. And here's what that opinion is. It says that contributors should only be invited to work on one thing at a time. If you want to be a contributor, you're going to need an access token in order to unlock any funds at all from the treasury and to place them in escrow. When you do that, the UTXO that represents your commitment at the bounty contract is also going to lock your access token. What does this mean? It means that once you make a commitment, you no longer have an access token to commit to something else. And the only way to get that access token back is for the issuer to say, oh, okay, you did it. And everything gets unlocked, both the token rewards and your access token, so that you can once again contribute again. This thing is built on it's currently built on a Gatsby project. So one of the things we're going to do is transition from Gatsby over to Next. And this kind of connects back to, somebody wrote this question about highlighting why React and JavaScript is dominant right now. And so we can talk about this question as the working group comes together to think about a little more front end. And I'll go deeper into why we're moving over to Next from Gatsby when we get to that point. Okay. But we want to transition from Gatsby to Next. We want to transition from the incredibly ad hoc set of functions that were kind of written in real time between September and March, and that are still being used under the hood on this live example right here. We want to replace all of that messy kind of experimental transaction building stuff that we had with Mesh, which in part came out of that work. Okay. So we have the opportunity to kind of rebuild and clean this up, learn about the tools as we go, and of course, along the way, to look at the actual contracts. Okay, so this one includes the chance to look at Plutus logic, to integrate it with a front end, then to do the really fun part of saying, okay, well, now that we have this thing working on V1, let's migrate to V2 of Plutus. And then also there's a bit of tokenomics going on here in the background, because all of the bounties listed here have gimbals attached to them. And those gimbals and the movement of those gimbals are precisely what we can report on in some of this dashboard stuff that I'm showing you an example of right here. So I hope you can see that there's kind of an important connection between some sort of dashboard or reporting tools and the DApp that might result in the movement of tokens that's reported right here. A lot of give and take between these. All right. So any questions about that one? I see John has. In this case, funds would be by. Okay, so actually that's a great question. Yeah, some of the thinking as well, you know, this DApp right here is, you know, yes, it's incomplete and unreliable just because it's the early days, but the scaling piece by design, we would like to create an example that's not meant to be the one-stop shop, that's not meant to be the monolith, you know, your place to go for Cardano bounties. Rather, we want to prepare an open source DApp that anybody can instantiate. And so my personal vision would be to share this as an open source tool so that when somebody gets funded by Catalyst, they can spin up their own instance of this thing, write and fund their own bounties to complete their Catalyst project and distribute those Catalyst funds this way. That's just the world I want to live in, right? I want to live in a world with 1,000 local versions of Uber and no global Uber, okay? And so this is just another example of that. Thousands of instances of treasuries instantiated and run by, you know, the people who in their communities are able to do so. Other questions about this? Hey, Juan.
Quick, yeah. Hey, Juan.
sir.
Nice to have you around. Just a quick one. In terms of breaking down the ask for the bounties, is it just that sentence? Like, for example, the first one, audit the crypto startup school course from A16Z. Like, is there more? Is there like a sentence? Yeah, because I'm thinking, because in a way, bounties are a bit like a job description, right? Where it can be really like paragraphs upon paragraphs, or it can be, you know, like product hunt, right? Where it's super succinct and so
there's a way to like add links and steps to completion and expected results here. And this DApp and this entire structure, first of all, like, I hope you see that like this is about as styled as the front end template, right? It's minimal. This is not ready for the big time. The amount of effort on design that went into this has been extremely limited so far. And the format of how these bounties are presented here and how the details are presented inside of each one is only a starting place. And, you know, myself or anybody else just haven't gone much farther on it just because of a lack of time, right? We just haven't yet. So this is a really good chance to think through, hey, what is the best way to present a bounty? How should this be styled on the page and presented here? Those are all questions that we can be looking at as we jump into this thing.
awesome, cool, thank you.
It looks a little better when I zoom out. That's the cards were at least designed to be like that, not having everything bumping into each other. But I haven't done any what's the word I'm looking for? Responsive design yet.
Hey, James, sorry if I missed this in any of the other meetings, but is there an issue with the connect a wallet button right now?
There shouldn't be. Oh, look, yeah, it's not working on mine. Is that because I don't have a wallet? You know, I just connected a wallet earlier today from a browser where I had NAMI connected, so I'm not sure. I could stick around to play with that one, Curtis, right after this call.
Okay.
Just get that working. Yeah, but everything, like even this connect a wallet button, it's fully hacked together and has been revised by a couple of different hands in real time, just enough to get a proof of concept working. And on a personal note, I'm really excited to rebuild this thing from scratch with mesh. It's not gonna take long, and that's something that we can do together. And so, right, once again, I see that a few people have said, hey, I'm in for this project, and that's really awesome. That rebuilding process is going to be both fun and educational. All right, Justin, to your question, great question. The bounty description, we're playing with this idea of a headless Dap, something that doesn't require private servers, but is accessible and then uses the Cardano part for, you know, the logic and security. And so this is a pretty good step in that direction, but obviously we still need a web server, right? We still need to host the website somewhere. So just taking that into account and saying, okay, if we make an open Git repo, that is we use, you know, the continuous deployment option in this case of what Gatsby JS offers, but Vercel offers the same thing for Next.js. We can have a Git repo, we can continuously deploy it, and each one of these bounties is actually represented by a markdown file in the public repo. Okay. Now, what goes on chain as metadata is the slug or the file name of each of those markdown files. So if you build a transaction to either commit to a bounty or when the issuer unlocks it, each of those transactions has this slug right here in the metadata. That's a reasonable solution, but it's absolutely incomplete. Okay, this doesn't force anyone to leave unchanged the markdown file in the near or the long term, but it does at least offer an initial way to start thinking about how can we limit the amount of data we put on chain while creating a reference to some off-chain data. Okay, yeah, exactly. Now, can you imagine maybe hashing that markdown file? And maybe the hash of the markdown file, maybe that should be included on chain. That would add an extra level of assurance that those files haven't changed. But that's exactly the kind of design problem that I think will be really interesting to talk about. You know, we'll do the initial part of rebuilding this thing, but that's just our portal to the much more interesting questions of how do we make this scalable? What if we want the issuer to be multi-sig? How do we build, like I said, that assurance between what's on chain and maybe the markdown that we see in a Git repo? All right, so this is our overview. And just like the rest of this board, I'm going to keep this open. I hope you will too. And if you have questions about any of these projects, feel free to add them here. If you'd like to add your own idea for a project, I can't promise that we'll make a lot of progress on it in only the next 5 weeks, but it can't hurt to add your project here so that we can start thinking about, hey, who would want to collaborate on that? Can we start to build a sub-team to work on that? Any questions about this short preview of what's coming over the next few weeks?
Do these projects have skeletal documentation where I can sit, read to get more information on them?
Working on it in real time. Yeah, that should be another. Let me add that outcome, because you're exactly right. All of these, we need to be thinking about the documentation of each one. None of them have sufficient documentation yet, just because there's not yet enough people working on them. But it should absolutely be a goal to improve it.
I've got high
Is it-
interest in assisting with documentation,
Awesome.
but the technical part is a challenge for me. But if I get somebody who knows and explain it to me that this is this way and this way, I can put hours, put up a documentation, then hand it over to you to refine, to assist everyone coming along.
That would be a dream
Yeah.
come true. That sounds like the
Eh,
kind
eh,
of collaboration we're trying to
like
build.
right now. Yeah. If, for
Incredible.
example, for these three right now, they are skeletal links explaining at least there must be an aim, objectives, a brief background, and what we hope to attain, the how to for anyone. If they are not there, and you say, all right, Bernard, can you help us with this one? Definitely, I will put an hour or two per day, so that if a new person is coming, they click a link and then they can read a little bit, have a direction.
Yes.
It is also worth mentioning that different modes of learning, right? Some people, like text, some others like video, some
Yeah.
others, graphics.
Videos, yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, as a practice round for building the current iteration of this PPBL course, I made a mini course specifically about the bounty, treasury, and escrow. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pull those modules in for anybody who wants to catch up into the current course. And Bernard, yes, if right, all of us, I hope we're all thinking about, hey, where would I fit on a team? I say it to myself probably 16 times every day. Whew, I can't do it alone, right? All of us know that.
Yeah.
All of us know that on a real software development team, people have specialized roles. That's beautiful. So how do you build those sorts of robust teams in a DAO or in a distributed ecosystem, or in a place where people don't work for one organization anymore, but they make a living by contributing a bit over here and a bit over there? All of this is connected. All of this, we get to be pioneers of it, right? And I hope you can see that in this pioneering work, some kind of tokens representing what we've done, some kind of reporting representing what groups of people have done, and some way of coordinating work. This is why we're calling each of these three things primitives, right? These are not ends in themselves. They're all opportunities for us to learn together. But I feel very confident that we can't go wrong by learning how to use tokens that represent work, reporting of work that's been done, and ways to coordinate work, because everybody here is gonna have the imagination to then put these pieces together and build the solutions that you've been dreaming about building. Okay, so this just gives us a place to start to practice working together and maybe have some really exciting things to share with the world, not just in terms of the code we write, but the collaboration processes that we build up in real time together. And so with that in mind, right, obviously 90 minutes have passed already, but it wouldn't be a live coding session if we didn't go over time a tiny bit right now. I want to repeat one more time. This board is ours to use to start coordinating the next round of work. So I encourage you to keep this tab open add your questions, add your ideas over time. Think about what where you might want to be committing to learning and contributing over the next few weeks. And that's what this last bit is for down here. Okay, to kind of substantiate what you want to be doing. There's going to be 2 rounds of commitment making this week and next. First is informal, right here on the Miro board. Everybody can find a card that looks like this and claim it as yours, right? You can double click up at the top where it says your name, and you can change this to your name. And then fill it in. Who are you? Nicknames, if there's something you wish people would call you, you got that. Discord handle, of course, and time zone can make it easier to collaborate. And then these 4 prompts. Right? What do you want people to know about you, or what are your long-term goals? What do you want to learn? What do you want to focus on for the next 5 weeks? And what's maybe something that you could teach or help out with? Okay. And I'm hoping that this gives everyone here a place to send the signal of what you're going to be prioritizing over the next few weeks. If you've ever been to one of our playground sessions, you might already be familiar with this. But the idea right here is this is just a distributed and kind of ownerless place to share a bit about yourself. And so if you have time, feel free to jump into this right now. If you don't have time right now, once again, keep this tab open. And when we do live coding next week, this is where I'll start. I'll just remind people about the opportunity to share a bit about themselves here. And we can take a moment to for everybody to scroll around and see what other folks have shared about themselves. Any questions about this informal commitments bit? Nicholas, not that I'm yet aware of, but if I'm wrong, if anybody has yet seen a CIP about credential metadata standards, yes, that's exactly where I hope we're going with this. I think that there are other organizations who are probably very close to planting their flags as well and to starting these conversations. So maybe somebody from this group will be the one to initialize that CIP, or maybe we'll see one emerge over the next few weeks, and anybody who's interested can jump in and contribute to that. But I really hope that the work we do right here helps move towards that conversation. I can see that some people have jumped in already. Just a final note, and then we'll just spend more time, anybody who wants to bounce around this board. What's coming next? Okay. We are going to substantiate our commitments a bit more starting next week. So next week, just like you were invited during the first week of the course to share a testnet address, next week you'll be invited to share a mainnet address, which, like Lucas mentioned, mainnet is easier to use right now. So at least we can rely on it to do the things we expect it to do. But yes, it costs real ADA to use, okay? So we're gonna distribute student tokens on mainnet and some initial gimbals for you, which just give us a token that we can move around to run experiments. We still have to pay transaction fees using real ADA, and I'll show you, we'll make sure to distribute just a bit of gimbal pool rewards to people so you're not spending money on those transactions. But we'll be able to substantiate commitments and in fact start to use an emerging version of this bounty system that will be enabled by those student tokens over these next few weeks. So nobody nobody needs to, nobody's going to hold you to any commitments you're making yet, right? These emojis up here are informal, and it's great to know who's interested in what. But by next week, you'll see it in Canvas. You'll be invited to share that mainnet address, and soon to start making some slightly more formal commitments. That's where we're headed. Thanks everybody for taking the time to reflect a bit today, to share some feedback, to listen to these coming attractions, and to think about your priorities for what's coming next. And if you're taking the time to do it right now, or if you get to this later, to sharing a bit about what you're excited to be doing over the next 5 weeks and beyond. That's the agenda for this session, but I'm happy to stick around if anybody has questions about anything here, or technical questions, or anything else you want to talk about. But thanks, everybody.